In this episode, we're going to be talking about some re-signings, extension, and Swiss Cheese's top 5 players to watch for both MPO and FPO 2023. I'm JK Discoff. Alongside me, I have Swiss Cheese, and this is the Spit Out.
What's up, JK? How are we doing today?
We're doing pretty good. We don't have like a lot of crazy things to talk about, but we're kind of getting into like the actual disc golf offseason where we're actually going to see some people signing a little bit of extensions and maybe some players going to companies that we never thought they'd even go to.
So, fair. Yeah. Even the ones that you think are locked up are never really locked up in disc golf from what we've learned.
No.
And we've learned recently. So
I was very surprised with the whole Paige Shue announcing she's leaving Dynamic Discs. This kind of just seemed like one of those that was just like a forever thing. It's been a while since we've seen like Paige Shue actually in the news up there for competing for like any sort of win. I know she had a kid as well as she had a world championship in 2018. So we just haven't heard from her much since. So it was weird to see that she was dropping her company. I'm wondering who is actually going to pick her up.
Yeah, and her father does work at Dynamic, right?
Like, so there is close relations there. It was just like
she kind of like another.
She's been there since she's like 16, I think.
Yeah, this is kind of like another like Kona move where you know what I mean. Leaves what you think is like a family affair. So yeah, it is interesting. You know what I mean. I think there's a lot of people that are gonna kind of be interesting, especially with the FPO signings and Dynamic. You know what I mean? As big money has kind of flowed through that company, you have some other players that might be wanting to get in on that. You know what I mean? If I'm up for a contract negotiation, that's some of my stuff of here's my talking points, here's my placings, here's this. And so that would be kind of some of my arguments. So it'll be kind of interesting. And I think I don't know if that played into this or, you know what I mean? Sometimes players just need a change, you know what I mean? And not a bad time for her. Like you said, she's been away. She's been on doing the family tour life. She's had some spot starts. I know she kind of like made a name again and Idlewild a little bit and kind of things of that nature. So she's been around popping. So yeah, maybe it could also be like just a personal change and, you know, something along those lines. But we're talking about a world champ, and it is a big signing in the grand scheme of things. As much as she's been away from the game of disc golf, it's still a former world champ. It still's got a name, and it's something that you can promote. So it'll be interesting who she attaches herself to.
Well, I do think that I know who she's going to attach herself to and where she's going to be moving forward. However, I think one of the things that I kind of in the back of my mind is why we're seeing this move from Paige Shue is when you're discussing Dynamic, especially in the FPO category. Well, actually, not even that. I can take a step back of just the money where they're giving in players. Now they're paying Ricky Wysocki a lot of money. They just had the biggest contract with Kona, or the biggest public. I don't know what the details were, but like a lot of money going to Kona. And now if you're Valerie Mandujano after your performance this year, you got to be asking for a little bit more money, you'd assume. Now it just seems like Paige Shue, right? Because the recent dominance. And what Paige Shue doesn't really have a lot of recent things to kind of, you know, bet for herself over players like Kona, who has got a guaranteed 5 years. And you have Valerie, who don't know how long her contract is, but if she was going to stay for Dynamic, and Dynamic really, you know, after 1 year sitting there, they're going to feel like jump ship on Valerie. What is there left for Paige Shue? And when you are a world champion, that should have a lot of, you know, say in how much you're getting paid and where you're going to be respected. And maybe that wasn't meeting up to par for Paige Shue. So that is in the back of my mind. Maybe this was a stepping stone on her deciding to depart.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah. You know, some of the intricacies and what's on the players' minds, you know, as much as you may feel that you get it based on like their Twitter or anything along those lines, you really don't know what's part of their decision making. So I'm sure a lot of those factored. I'm sure every bit of that. So, but who do you got her going with?
All right. Well, so a little bit of you know, people sharing on Twitter. We saw some comments and some liking of tweets. So we can jump into them. I have the pictures here. We have this one right here. Lone Star Disc liked a reply to a tweet saying, "I could see her," as in Paige Shue, "going somewhere where she can be the team captain, like Yulia Discraft. I think she would be fantastic in that role. My pick is at Lone Star Disc." Lone Star liked the tweet there. And then a reply to that was someone said, again, in reference to where Paige Shue is going to go. It says, I'm going to guess maybe the former FPO champ that just announced she is leaving for longtime sponsor. And then Lone Star comments, we like her too, in a reference again to Paige Shue. So there's multiple times referenced on social media that is kind of very public to anybody, where Lone Star Discs is making reference to liking and maybe even picking up Paige Shue. How much do you think this is actually true?
It's funny that it's funny that you say that, because I remember when we were debating about Kramer, and I said, hey man, I've read some comments, I've read into some of these, and if somebody's in negotiations and something along those lines, they're not going to be sending these out, right? Like, you know what I mean? Unless they got something locked in. Man, if Lone Star does do that, it's an absolute huge signing, and they're making some very big waves in this offseason. Locking in Nico, and if they hit Paige Shue, re-signing Kramer. No, I think that's fair. So initially, I kind of disagree. I am far more willing to like listen to your side based on those, right? I think that is kind of very proof driven, and have seen a track record, especially with the Lone Star president. That being said, I initially, like, my first gut thing was Discraft. I know she's very tight with the Macbeths. I know they're very tight in that front, and you know what I mean? I think she kind of like one thing that Dynamic or does have is like what we've seen is like a very close knit family type of atmosphere. So it's kind of interesting to know that maybe she's looking for that, and it could be something along the lines of like Discraft. So that's why I kind of thought that. But then another part of me saw like a prodigy that may need a pro, especially an FPO talent, especially a world champion. Anybody who can attach themselves to a world champion is going to definitely reap the benefits. So I kind of also thought of that as another bit. So those are my two somewhat thinking points. But now that you said it, I'll definitely give Lone Star like a slight edge, but I don't know if it's all the way there. So
I don't know. It was just interesting to see that. I feel like maybe a little hinting from Lone Star there to hype it up just a tad bit. But we did have some other extensions. The biggest ones I saw, or the three that I saw, was Matt Bell getting extended to Thought Space Athletics for 2 more years. Alden Harris getting an extension 1 year to Prodigy, and Stacey Haas getting extended to MVP for 2 years. Those are the only ones that I think that I've heard in the past week.
Oh, yeah. And the only other thing that, like you alluded to, there's been talks of some other FPO possibly leaving Dynamic too, but you've alluded to that. Until that happens, who knows? But they got some names on Dynamic that it would be interesting if, you know what I mean, they did cut ship. So till that happens, yeah, we're right in that time of season now. Obviously, we're right before Christmas, but this is like right after Christmas, right after the New Year is when we start hearing contract drops, details. So start of the new year, finishing a new year. I'm sure that's also part of it. Like, you got to finish one, your actual contract has an end date, and you can't start till another one. So it'll be interesting. It's a mild off season, to say the least, but it's still enough of an off season to discuss, especially with the world champ.
Before we jump into your top list, I would like to say I did have Anthony Barela as my number 5 watch list. This past weekend, he took down the Arizona State Championship by 14 strokes. That was enough for him to not even play if there was another round. He didn't even have to play. He would still win. So just showing how good Anthony Barela is. I don't necessarily know how great the scene for MPO and the Arizona State Championships is, but that just shows Anthony Barela tearing up courses all time. He's really good in Arizona too.
No, it's funny because I think you might see him on my list also. So, but we'll jump right into my list.
Let's do it.
I'm kind of interested to see Jay's kind of reaction to some of these. This is all unscripted, unseen. Jay has not seen any of this. So we're going to start with my Swiss cheese top 5 players to watch. I did both FPO and MPO, but we're going to start with the FPO. So let's lead off like Jay did. Honorable mentions. Now, I'm starting off with some fairly big names. I got Alexis Mondahano and Macy Vela Diaz. I think these two can make possible jumps, but I don't know if they're going to make large enough jumps to kind of really shake the position rankings along those lines. Both are very good talents. Macy Valadiaz is probably one of my favorite FPOs along those lines to watch. So I just don't know if their game's going to kind of make the leaps and bounds or the shock and awe that, you know what I mean, might see some out of the other players. So that's kind of why I got them as my honorable mentions. I'm going to start with a rim rattler, something out of the dark here. My first top 5. Heidi Laine, 17th rated on UDise rankings. So first and foremost, if you guys do not know her, she's a European dynamic player. Didn't get much on the scenes as far as in the U.S. list here, but some of her strengths, she's got distance off the tee. She's one of the top European talents, top 15 finishes in all U.S. events, along with a 7th place finish at European Open, where there's plenty of U.S. talent in that tournament also. So she's finishing up there already on such a short career along her lines. Some needed improvements. Obviously, avoid OB strokes, improve circle 1X percentage. I think if she gets that up, she can possibly move up some number world rankings. And obviously, she needs U.S. Tour experience. This is something that she needs to gain along this lines. But she's not a name that people know too well. But that could kind of make some of those leaps and kind of pop on some future tournaments, especially with some of her distance play, where she can kind of make her name for herself. So that's my first, number 5.
Yeah, I think just the biggest thing in my mind when I think it happens to almost every European player that comes over to the U.S. tour, and specifically it seems to be happening in the FPO talent. Especially we saw Tatar off the rip, we saw Evelina, and we saw Hannah all just kind of didn't carry over to what we usually see out of them. And granted, they have all kind of started to grow, some faults here and there still, but they're still improving. So I would really like to see that first year on tour for Heidi Laine. And the problem is, for me, I don't put her on my top 5 list. I think that you can either put Macy Valadiaz or you put Alexis Manjano in this 5 spot, and you can put Heidi in that honorable mention just because of that U.S. tour experience, because at least I know what Macy and Alexis have done with the current fields. However, if Heidi comes and doesn't have that nervous, she kind of translates over perfectly, she could be a top 5. You're not wrong.
And it's fair. I'm first of which I don't know about her U.S. tour plans, but if you guys haven't looked at her, go ahead and look at some of her stats. She's won, I think, man, I'm trying to think. I want to say the Finnish state or not states country championship. So she's a name that's not well known. So that's kind of also my way of highlighting it. But we're gonna move on to number 4. Maria Oliva, number 19 ranked UDisc World Rankings. Her strength distance off the tee, top 15 last year in park percentage, C1 in regulation and C2 in regulation, and all those stats, and 14th in birdie percentage. Where she needs to improve and what I think where she needs to do to make her next leap this year. She needs to build on 2022 results through the entire season. She kind of had a very hot half and then kind of tailed off in the remainder of the season. So she really needs to improve that. I think as she gets the course, ins and outs of the course through the play and practice, that's going to kind of come along on that front. She needs to be consistent putting, especially from C1X. She's ranked 44th currently. If she can get that percentage up to where she's in the top 30th or higher, I think you're talking about at least another podium finish, pushing for a win possibly next year if she can get that percentage up along those lines. And then last she needs to improve fairway hit percentage. I think and this may have been another tale of the 2 seasons, but she kind of tailed off on that percentage as the season kind of came along. I get it that it's the grind and everything along those lines, but I think if she improves just that percentage, she has enough distance in her game and enough shot shaping in her game to where if she's hitting those fairways early with an improved putt, she's going to jump, and she's going to jump numbers and climbs and everything along those lines. So that's kind of my number 4.
I had Maria Oliva on mine. I do agree that she's going to do great things. And when you say her C1 axis is 44th in the field, and she's 19th on UDise. If she improves that to even, like you said, top 30, but honestly, I think she can improve it in the top 20, 25 right there. That's going to just shave off so many different strokes for her, and she's going to bump up, like you said. I think 14th in birdie percent just shows, too, just how many, I think, her putting and overall just bogeys are presented in her game. If she kind of, I think a lot of the times, improves upon those easier circle one putts that are kind of a must make. If she misses less of those, she's going to jump up, like you said. I think she's a great fourth place spot.
Nice. Moving on to number 3, Kat Mertsch, number 15th UDise rankings. Her strength is high level arm talent off the tee, both forehand and backhand equally. 10th in park percentage and 12th in birdie percentage, top 8 in DGPT rankings. And she's absolutely fearless on the course. No matter what the shot shape is, she believes she's going to hit it. Needed improvements, I think, as you guys watch Kat's games, I think they're evident. She does need to improve off fairway, improve her fairway hits and OB throws. So she needs to make sure that she's in on fairways. She's fighting being off fairway too often, or a lot of times those off fairways are OB in the Pro Tour. So she needs to kind of avoid that. She needs to avoid yo-yo stroke swings. So constantly you see her rattling off birdies and then the next hole hitting a double, hitting, bogeys, things of that nature. If she can just nail that in, where as opposed to taking a double or a triple, she's bringing it down to just a bogey, she's going to move up in that placing and in the rankings already. She's already 15th in UDise rankings with these yo-yo rounds. Imagine if she just tightened it up a little bit and kind of move forward on that front. And a more consistent putting stroke in general. I think she can be better in C1 and C2. I think she just needs a consistent percentage. So if I'm her, I'm definitely grinding on the putting green and just really trying to lock in my putt for the season. I think if she gets those, I am fully believing in Kat Mertsch's potential to kind of keep climbing the rankings as we go year and year. I think her game is getting to that point, and I think others' games are not changing enough to what the new FPO field is going to have to encounter. Kat's already looking at those shots. She's doing all those things. So she's my number 3 to watch. I think there's a very good possibility she gets a win this year, upcoming year. If I was a betting man, I'd bet on it. The odds would be pretty good. So you'll hear it first. She'll get her first dub. Major win, not major, elite win. We'll go elite.
Elite Series, yeah.
First.
I'll piggyback off that because I do think that Kat Mertsch has what it takes to win an Elite Series event. I think we've seen it not only I think you highlighted Kat Mertsch's game to a T. I think what she excels at is her ability to get down the fairway. But I love how you said those yo-yo stroke swings. That's exactly what she does. It was where she puts herself in position of these great scoring rounds. And when we see her kind of avoid these, we see her put up the highest round out of the FPO player in the entire year. And that was when she played her entire game. But we so often see her get rattle off 3 birdies in a row. Then it's you hit the first available and you're missing a circle one putt. It's you have to avoid these, right? You're allowed to make a mistake here and there. Don't get me wrong. Obviously that's just planned in everyone's game, but the mistake can't lead to more mistakes. You can't put yourself in a position where you put yourself off the fairway and then you put yourself in circle one, but you miss a circle one putt. You did all that work to get down to save yourself, and you're still missing the easy strokes. I think Kat Mertsch's scramble game is almost on that level of being on the top of her game, but it's just so often when her scramble ability is working, but it's not saving her any strokes. So is she considered a good scrambler then? Because it's not really working. You're still losing the strokes that you need to get. And I do think that when her putting game is fair, what? You don't agree with that point?
No. I figured that, man, you're really bad. You are really tense.
Yeah.
No, I agree with everything that you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
And I think that the biggest thing for her, I think the top 3 things that she can change is 1, staying in bounce. I think she needs to sacrifice some of the power and make sure she's staying in the fairway. 2, I think she just needs to stay consistent with her putt, like you said. And the one thing that's working is I just think that something changes in her putting form, or maybe it's just it just doesn't look the same when she's putting to her game. Something is just off.
Yeah, I agree. And man, she does have a pretty circle C2 putt. She's got a powerful putting stroke, but something, you know what I mean? It's just having that casual whole round, you know what I mean? That she just hasn't put it all together. And as we say, she hasn't put it all together. I off the top of my head, I wish I had the stats, but she had countless top tens, top 5 finishes on last year. You know what I mean? She's a name that she did make her name for herself on this last season. I think she's to make a next jump, she's got to get a dub. And I think she's expecting I'm expecting big things out of her also in the offseason. I think she's grinding disc golf. You know what I mean? I just think she's out there at all times. So I'm kind of interesting. But moving to number 2. You had her number 1. I certainly agreed. I was really happy you had her. Emily Beach, currently number 24 UDisc World Rankings. Strengths are elite distance off the tee. She's already put herself into arguably the top 5 distance drivers. In backhand, in my opinion, I wouldn't fault anybody mentioning her, although people will kind of not think of her. But she's got major distance off the tee. She's top 10 in C1 and C2 putting. When you're rookie of the year and you're lining up at top 10 in both of those already, I assume, and I am presuming that you're going to carry on that. That's something that, like, I think with the pro game and disc golfers, your first things that you're going to have trouble with on tour is your putt. So if you're in a top 10 on your rookie year already, this is part of her game that's already built in and solid, right? It's not changing, and it's going to be there against her competition at all times. So that's why I think definitely label it as a strength. I don't see a like hot and cold, you know what I mean? Anything along those lines. Like I said, DGPT Rookie of the Year. It's got a solid scramble game, also ranked 10th along those lines. But kind of like what you alluded to with Cat Mertsch, you need that consistency off the tee and to improve fairway hit percentages to 25 or higher also will help that. So again, when you're not hitting fairway and you're off OB, most often you're off OB with this tour, that's kind of why you kind of have to hit your scramble game. So if she get into that top 25 in the percentage, she's going to jump at least into the top 15. And we're talking 9, 10 ranking jumps is a big thing on a career. So moving along those lines, again, minimize damage. So it is when you're going OB, it's making sure that you're locking in. I think she can develop a little bit more of a layup game. I'm not saying like when the situation's right. I think she pushes a little too much, and I think she can kind of like rest on that putt and kind of like lay it up and go softer approaches at times. So I think that's kind of also that she can develop. And another need is more experience. As she again continually gets on this tour, she's going to improve when you have more rounds and you're facing more weather conditions, more wind reads. You're going to get better and develop more on the tour. And that's just going to come with time. I think she's got a great future. And I'm really expecting big things out of her next year. Like I said, top 15 minimum, possibly scratching the door of a top 10. I wouldn't be surprised with Emily this next season.
Yeah, I agree. Number 1 on my watch list. I could just say exactly all the things that you said. I would like to highlight some of those, so I'm not rambling too much. I think that the top 10 in the Circle 1 and Circle 2 putting, great, like you highlighted. First year on tour, when you're dominating that's something that just has to continue and hopefully improve upon. I don't necessarily know a lot of disc golfers that start from their rookie year and get worse. You don't see it too often. So I think that this is kind of very exciting for Emily Beach to kind of be this dominant. Hopefully it carries over to this next year. And I think that her biggest thing that she does need to improve on is that, the minimizing damage, right? Just figuring out that it's, you don't need to go all the way down the fairway. If you get down fair enough and you're in bounce, it's good enough. And you're on the fairway, it's good enough because your second shot, you have all this power. You can still get there anyways. And I think that's all Emily Beach needs to have. And all of that comes with the experience on tour. Playing these courses more is going to be help tremendous.
Underrated caddy game too. Definitely rocks the caddy, and I think it helps her game.
For who?
But moving on to my number 1 FPO player to watch.
Fucking knew it.
Holyn Handley, my favorite. You knew it was coming. Already number 10 UDisc World Rankings. Her strengths, elite FPO arm talent, power on both sides, including rollers. Let's not forget about her and Ella are probably the only real 2 that are kind of in play. Granted, I know Kat's done it, but these two are kind of developing the shots that we've seen in the MPO for the last 2 years that are kind of revolutionizing the game. And these ladies are starting to bring it into the FPO, and it's really, really exciting. So she's one of the forerunners on that. Third in birdie percentage and the fairway hit percentage on the season. You know what I mean? When you're in the top 3 on those two, you're going to be up there as far as in your finishes. Student of the game, Holyn, if you guys do not know, she follows the game. She's always working to improve. She's always willing to help. So she's really going to do a dig and grind on all aspects of her game to where she's going to make the needed improvements that she needs. Now, moving on to improvements, build on a strong season finish. I think you do not. The last thing that I think Holyn needs is kind of like a slow start. So I think she needs to hit the ground running on this season, really kind of just try to kick off her season properly. And then it'll carry off in the entire year. If she kind of has that slow, like, you know what I mean? There's some players that kind of grind it out for that first month. Yeah, she'll get better over the time, but I think I'll just discourage her a little bit on the season. And the season that I'm expecting for her, she needs to kind of have a hot start. Get one CX putting percentage above 80%, I think is a must to be considered in that top 5 where I could possibly see her going. But it has to be above 80, in my opinion. If it's below that, you're not going to be in that top 5. There's some people in that top 5 that are kind of on the edge that can kind of see different seasons. You know, you had Missy Gannon have a little bit lighter of a season than the year before. So there's players that get to be able to move in that spot is what I'm trying to say. But she's not going to do it without an 80% on C1X. Improve on the 10th C2 ranking. Now, I understand being in top 5 and me saying that she needs to improve that percentage is kind of a little bit ridiculous. But that being said, I think she has the talent to improve it. If she can get into like a top 8, top 7 or higher, again, we're talking about strokes on the tee, which is going to then move her up in placings and possibly get her some more wins. This is what separates the winners as far as in the FPO field than the low scores. It is that C2 putt percentage. That's what helped Paige dominate as much as it was on the distance. The distance gap has closed. So now it's about hitting C2 putting. And I think Holyn can lead on that and improve on that. Last, obviously with most disc golfers, especially with the ladies, improved OB rate. She's kind of in that same field. You got to just avoid OB whenever possible. It's taking things away. It's possibly laying up. I know it's difficult when you got albatross potential, but sometimes the smarter play, especially with wind reads and everything along those lines, is playing smarter to what the course is giving. I think if she does that more often, again, top 5 potential, borderline. Yeah, I'm expecting huge things, at least top 5.
Yeah, I just think it's kind of lame that you pick someone 10th in the UDisc World Rankings as someone to watch. It's kind of obvious,
Gotcha.
right? Top 10.
Says the guy who put Gannon Burr on his watch list.
My honorable mention.
I'm just saying.
Nice.
Like I said, would you not say a 5-point jump as far as world ranking is not notable? And if she gets a 5-point jump, we're talking about moving into the top 5. That's why I'm putting her as a player to watch.
I'm just saying that's what ballsy ass. That's ballsy to say because you're saying that she's gonna be a 5th world. Like you have to go ahead of all these players. Like it's just in my head, like in my thought process, picking Emily Beach at the 24th. I think it's for her. It's easier, I think, to get to that like 10th spot. So that's 14 spots rather than it's so much harder for Holyn to get at those 5 spots. But if she does it, man, good pick.
I get it.
Good pick.
I said it. I understand it. It's bold. I said it. I like
it. Top 5, I think. Good list. Good list.
All right. Moving on to that was my FPO. I hope you guys enjoyed that. A little different. I went out there a little bit. But moving on to the MPO. See how out there I get on this one.
No.
So first, let's start off with honorable mentions.
Not good.
Honorable mentions as far as players to watch. All right, I'm going to throw out Emerson Keith out there. Now, first of which, Emerson Keith obviously had some things go down last year. His mind was not on disc golf. He has proven on big stages in the past that he can compete with some of the elite players. So I think kind of getting himself settled, getting his game in, I think he's a possible player to watch where he'll be kind of surprising on a couple tour spots for this season coming up. Next, I also got Cole Redolin. Young talent, distance off the tee. I think he's going to move along. Now, as far as players to watch, it's just someone to keep an eye on because I think this is the season before he really goes off. You know what I mean? But this is kind of where he makes a little bit of his name, and then all of a sudden he's going to kind of pop as he gets a little bit further and more on the tour. So it's just kind of a slight players to watch. Don't like those already.
I like the Cole Redolin one. That's. I don't see the Emerson Keith one. I just do not see it. I think even we looked at the stats from last year, like being like 80th place for Circle 1 and 100 and something. I think it was for Circle 2. I don't want to lie, so let me look at it. He was in 86th place and 40th place in 2021. And then last year, 85th and 122. So I feel like it wasn't even necessarily that it wasn't just focusing on disc golf this year. Maybe, but his stats just seem the same. And the one thing I wouldn't be surprised if Emerson Keith ever wins the World Championships, I'll never be surprised. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. He's just always there for some reason.
Always. Man, like I said, I find it kind of interesting with the season that he had last year with all the family stuff. I'm really kind of thinking that this might be a year where he kind of just, man, I kind of think he'll have like one of those like Valerie. Man, I don't want to say Valerie because she won, but he's going to have like a 3-stop stretch where he's up there. You know what I mean? Like where he's playing well. So that's what I'm going to say.
I'll tell you what. If he gets picked up by Lone Star Discs, he'll be a better disc golfer.
Nice. All right, there you go. You're willing. You should just be on like Lone Star's marketing team.
No, he's from Texas. It just makes sense.
I get it. Yeah. All right, number 5. Jay's gonna hate it, but Eagle McMahon is on my players to watch. Number 3 currently UDise rankings. Obviously you guys know his strengths: elite distance off the tee, elite putter in the field, top talent when healthy. Concerns and storylines and why I got him in my players to watch this season. Can he return to 1050 after the injury? I think is a very big question. How often does he go? Does he turn to that power forehand? Does he go back to it? Does he erase it from his game? Kind of like Simon. We saw what Simon did after a year off an injury. So I think it's notable to have Eagle on this list, especially with his arm talent being arguably more powerful than Simon in a lot of ways on the forehand, especially. So does a limited schedule help or hinder his season? Eagle has made it clear that he's kind of tailed back this season to kind of better perform in the larger tournaments. He's done it in last year prior to the injury. And, he made note of it moving forward. So does this help or hinder his season? When you have less tournaments, you have to perform in those tournaments. So it's interesting to me to see where he lines up, because you and I also know when things do not go well with Eagle, they seem to kind of go for a little bit. You know what I mean? It kind of carries over for a period. So if you're talking about a shortened schedule and you have a bad tournament and you don't have an injury off week or not canceling the next one, how's that carrying over into it? And how does he respond to those situations? That's why Eagle's in my top 5 players to watch. Not about moving up. It's just storyline.
No, just storyline. And that's why I think it's fair. I think that this is a fair watch list, because that was kind of what I was doing last week when I was picking Nico, because he was coming back from a suspension. It's along the same lines as where you haven't seen Eagle really perform too much. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see like a full, hopefully healthy Eagle McMahon. And I think those are all great questions that I hopefully are answered fairly soon. Can he return to 1050 after the injury? Because we talked last week how there's no player right now that is 1050. And if he comes back from an injured season and then is the first one back to 1050, that would be a crazy storyline to watch. How often, if like you said, if he ever goes back to that power forehand, that was one of the tools that people would like die over. That was like anytime anyone asked what attribute from a disc golf will you take, everybody was saying Eagles forehand because that's just how much of a presence it had in the overall disc golf world. So if that's eliminated from his game overall, is that the same Eagle McMahon? It seems that Simon posted a video not too long ago where he did talk about how he was throwing forehands in general. So it doesn't seem that that is going to be completely eradicated from his game. However, there is a difference between a forehand and Eagles power forehand. And I think that's very much noticeable.
Very true.
Yeah,
And
I think
then
that's what you said about Eagles.
separated him from all the other talent. You know what I mean? So it's interesting if that's still in play. So moving on to number 4. Aaron Gossage, number 27 UDisc World Rankings, strengths, elite forehand in the game, top finish potential. I think he's displayed that on multiple courses already, where he's been in names and been in the top 5s. Oh, and by the way, he has a great goddamn forehand is another note. It's that good. It's got to be listed twice along those lines. So needed improvements. He's got to must improve all around putting stroke, both C1, C2. I think that's what's really holding him back. Now, that being said, as far as disc golfers and their growth in the game, I think when people's putting stroke is the worst thing they have to improve, I think it's the easiest thing to improve for most. So I think if he kind of develops that and gets into those habits, he's going to be there. Is he more than a ball golf course golfer? I know that might be phrased weird, but he seems to be more talented on these wide open spanses. I think of OTB, you think of Emporia. Is that his skill set, and can he kind of develop? Now, I know he's from Colorado. I know he plays in woods. I know he's played in elevation. So I know he has those games, but we haven't really seen it develop on the tour as far as being on lead cards or being up there in finishes. So he needs to kind of improve that. Him on open field, I think he's like a sleeper pick on any golf course that people need to put him on like a sleeper list of possibly winning. More development of the backhand. I'm of a proponent that as much as we want to say specialty disc golfers can compete and make a place in disc golf, and that's true, but in order to be elite, it's very difficult. You know what I mean? You can only really think of like possibly like one elite player that's one like a backhand specialist, and that'd be Conrad. And I don't think some people don't even put Conrad in the elite stage, just a hair below. So I think in order to be known or displayed as one of the best disc golfers, you got to have a more rounded talent. So a little bit further development of that backhand game will help him.
Yeah, I mean, I had Aaron Gossage on my list. So this is definitely a person that I think should be definitely on everybody's eyes to watch. Now, I think what you say about what he does well is perfect. His forehand doesn't really need improvement because it's so damn good. Now, I do think all these improvements are kind of fair criticism. I think that he just has to figure out a putting stroke, stay consistent with it, practice it, spend an entire offseason working on just that putt for both Circle 1 and Circle 2, shave as many strokes off the green as you possibly can. And I think we are going to see him strive a little bit more on the ball golf courses, which is not a problem. I think half of this season, and people forget about it because we really have that recency bias of like what's happening at the end of the season with World Championships, with USDGC, that you forget that there's so many events that are played on the open where there's and he just needs to capitalize on the beginning of this season. I think that he will. I think, and along the same lines of the more development of the backhand, I think that that's just going to come with time. He's a young player, and the more he throws it, the better he's going to come along with it. And I don't think that he's in a place like someone like Chandler Kramer where it's like almost from the beginning. He does have the fundamental concepts, and he does have he's got the 400 plus power with the backhand, and just kind of the fine minute details of figuring out the next step.
The stash plays, let's be honest too. That alone is why he's on my list. Just the fucking stash. My number 3, getting on there. Niklas Anttila, number 9 UDisc World Rankings, one of my favorite players. Strengths. He's clean off the tee, 10th in birdie percentage, consistent, smooth form, podium potential for every course, style alike. 2nd in European Tour, 8th in PDPT rankings, and 25th in DGPT rankings. That is one hell of a season. And it's kind of along those lines of where he can capitalize and how he's going to capitalize. Again, high ranking. He's made a name for himself with the USDGC. Where is he going to do and how can he move along? The needed improvements is build on C2% putt percentage. I think if he locks into that percentage to where he's hitting those at a higher clip, he's gonna have some of those bad tourneys that he's had, and those are gonna kind of move into solid tourneys. He kind of seems to be like a feast or famine player where he's either up there or down there. So if he improves that C2 percentage, he's going to take those down there's and everything's going to grow up from there along those lines. Minimize damage when not throwing his best. I think he is a player with the youth that he has. I think it also kind of gets in his head when things are going bad. I don't think he's had as much as experience on the tour, especially the US, to kind of handle those situations and minimize a terrible round or turning a terrible round into a bad round. Those are the difference makers. No matter what on tour, every pro is going to run into that round where it's brutal, right? It's how he adjusts to those to where he can still cash and things of that nature and move up. So that's my Niklas.
For some reason, I just don't see it. I just don't know. And they can point out all these great strengths. Like when you talk about the 10th and the birdie percentage, you talk about like he does have consistent smooth form. Like you're right. He in 25th in DGBT, 9th in UDise. Like he has all these great things attached to him. I think it's just like he just plays disc golf in quote unquote boring to me. Like he just plays like everything I just see is like he sees the line, he hits the line, he bang, move on, next one. It's just like he does it so well. And I think that's just like the reason that he's not throwing these like he doesn't have anything where it's like, oh, Niklas Anttila does this. It's like, no, he just plays disc golf really fucking good. Like that's just what he does. And I do think that the one strength or the one thing he does need to improve on is when he does have those off rounds, he doesn't do a good job at like shaving off those strokes where it's like, hey, like you really needed to take that extra time on that one because like that just adds on to a not good round. And it does seem that he does get in his head a little bit. We watched him at the World Championships. It seemed that one round when it was not going his way, clearly not going his way, he was just all in on his own head. Every single missed opportunity, he was just, hanging his head low, hitting his putt. You can visibly see the anger to him. So he just needs to work a little bit on that, on his mental game. And I think shaving off a few strokes here and there is going to push him up on overall rankings.
And the other reason I have him, I think like he's always kind of, a lot of the European talents is always kind of bunched together, right? You have the Henna Evelina, and it's always Nicholas and Vano, the talks of who's the better European. And with the USDGC performance, taking second there, being in a tight competition, I think it kind of solidifies his chance to kind of step away from Vino and really kind of move up to that premier name of himself. You're absolutely right. I can understand why people don't like it. As much as his form is smooth, it's not necessarily pretty either. Like he's kind of like clunky elbows, you know what I mean? It's not like a fluid per se, but he can putt. He's been a guy that I've been watching and I'm a fan of. He's still a young talent. You know what I mean? He's got room to grow, which is kind of scary with the season that he had. But I wouldn't. But my biggest worry and part of the reason I have him on the watch is because I think he's also kind of like a possible. I don't want to say bust potential, but you know what I mean, like an Adam Hammes where he had a like great year and then kind of fell off. That's my one worry, and that's also why I kind of think he's on this list also. But moving on to number 2, your boy, my boy, Anthony Barela. All right, I think I got a little bit. I don't know who's more hyped on Anthony AB than you or me, but I really see the potential of AB this year. 15th in UDise world rankings, strengths. Obviously, we know he's got at least elite distance off the tee, both forehand and backhand. 9th in park stat, which is just insane, and birdie percent. He also has 9th. Birdie percent regulation and C2 in regulation. So top not 10 in all 3 of those stats. He's got eye-popping shot ability. You want to talk about like eagle eye vids or, things that make you pop. AB's got that potential as far as any time with any distance. Needed improvement, consistent putting and improved percentage overall. He needs to keep climbing those percentages to where he can start jumping into possible top 10, top 8, things of that nature, to where I think he could go. I think he can kind of finish the year possibly in a top 7. if he kind of puts everything together. Another year fully on tour is going to help. But it's going to start with his putting in order to get there first and foremost. Avoid OB and improve fairway percentage. Too often do we see AB kind of fighting himself with being off fairway. And don't get me wrong, magic happens in those instances, but imagine if it was just off the tee or just off, the fairway greens, everything along those lines. So being able to see, I would love to see just AB fairway hitting. Those are why he gets those casual hot rounds and pop off on the season. And if he does that more consistently, he's going to be up there. And then I got stop the bleeding. So he's another one of those when things are bad, he doesn't stop. He doesn't compose himself and stop the bleeding. He kind of just wallows into that and kind of goes downhill from there. If he can stop the bleeding on one hole, one tournament, it's already going to improve his placing and it's already going to improve his ranking, in my opinion, because he's kind of has that unnecessarily like double bogey holes often. If you can just limit that to where it's a bogey or it's a tough par, that's going to help move his game. Like I said, top 15 already. I think with another full season under his belt, possibly top 7 or higher is my I'm putting him at 7 with the potential of being higher. I think he can kind of have like a Gannon Burr breakout season where he really makes a name for himself.
I love AB. I've been on the AB train for a very long time. I think everything that you've said is very fair. I don't really have a whole lot to add. The one thing that I really like to emphasize is that he's not, what we just talked about Aaron Gossage, he's not just a wide open player. Yeah, he bombs, but man, he's so good in the woods too. His control is just insane. That's a reason that his tour series is a T-Bird 3 and not a destroyer. That's because he can throw not only far, but he can throw the shots. He has all the shots that he needed. Talk about an elite forehand. Anthony Barela can bomb a forehand. He can shape the forehand. He can shape every shot. But for some reason, he can't avoid a OB, and that's just I don't know why. It's like his AB's worst nemesis is OB, and it's just a problem that he just has to figure out, and he's got to stay in bounds and stop the bleeding overall on these useless, wasted strokes.
Man, I think AB has such a live arm that at times it gets him in trouble.
Yeah, it goes too far.
Like where he looks at it and he's like, I can get there. And no doubt you can, but it's going to take something perfect. And he does it still. But there's times where that's when he gets himself in trouble, you know what I mean, along those lines. So it's kind of interesting there. So with such a bold prediction, moving AB up into the top 10 from 15, we're going to go into my number 1 MPO player to watch next season, Corey Ellis. I know Jay hates it, but it is what it is. Number 12 UDise World Rankings. Strengths. He's elite putter in the game, 4th in C2. Enough distance to stay with the elite arms. Overall, 12th in the birdie percentage on the season already. Needed improvements. We're going to keep hitting it. Improved fairway percentages. Learn and build from the MVP Open results. You can't have a loss like that and not have that really kind of affect your game, and knowing and telling yourself what you're going to do when you're put into that situation again. And I think Ellis makes those changes to kind of put himself up there. And I also said, in order to kind of make the jump that I want him to make, he's got to return to 2021 at the minimum C1 percentage. He's got to get back to that level. I think he kind of had a couple of dips, and even in the MVP, he missed from circle 1, which ended up costing him that win. Let's be honest. But the dude has such a compact and, you know what I mean, no X step, just walk up, can bomb, great form. So he's got the distance, he's got the putt. It's putting it all together for those 3 to 4 days to kind of get up there. Now, part of the reason why I got him also on my list is because this dude has been steadily climbing for a few, 2 years now, right? Corey Ellis from 2021 was kind of the shocker as far as being the best putter for many. Going into 2022, not only did he make his name again on the putting green, but he also made his name as far as being in lead cards and potentially competing for wins. So that's why I got him as my number 1. Possible potential, granted. Now, I will say, with AB, and Coriolis. I have more confidence in AB moving up, right? And that's kind of why I got Coriolis as my number one to watch, because I really think that he has the potential to climb, and he also has the potential to dip into that top 20 from 17 to 25 ranking. I think he has as equal potential in doing that. It's really going to be what his offseason is going to be entailing and how he's going to make the improvements that he needs to compete on a grander level. So that's why he's kind of my player to watch. I don't necessarily, I see the potential in having him a very solid year. I can also see the potential in him having a down year, but that's why he's on my players to watch.
Yeah, I do agree that he is someone that we should put our eyes on. I can't remember if I put him on anywhere on my list. I don't think I did. I do kind of regret that now, especially that his putting is on the next level. He is an elite putter, and I think that if he does return to 2021 style putting, where that is just absurd, where he's literally hitting every single putt damn near inside circle one, that's what's going to carry him off. Because if he can guarantee getting those strokes in, that it's just going to, worry a little bit more about getting himself in more circle one, circle two opportunities, which I think that we've seen that work for Coriolis. And I think when we see him play a lot of these more courses a little bit more, we're going to see him strive, especially with the MVP Open. I think the confidence that goes in that, like, man, he was a bad throw away from winning the event. And I think putting yourself in that position, like you're there before, this next time he does that, it's not going to be, oh my God, what, like, this is my first time. It's like, no, like I messed up last time. Let's not do that again. Let's hit this. Let's walk away. Let's get our first win. I think that Coriolis just has that mindset, has the confidence, has the tools to do it, and that 2023 is going to be his best season yet. I do agree.
Say what you will. You would not be surprised with a Coriolis win on next season, right? No. I think anybody who's watching disc golf and watching the MPO would not be shocked by that. But for whatever reason, and there's not many people that you could say that with players, right? Like legitimately feel good and being like, hey, would you be surprised if this person won? Like, no, yeah, like I think that list is kind of short, and we put him on that list, and I think a lot of people put him on that list. But for whatever reason, when people think of him as far as not being watched or seen, you know what I mean? He just gets left off those lists. He gets left off in those conversations. I don't want to say like he's just forgettable, but like people just tend to like, because how he is in his play is just so consistent on all levels, like whether his drive, you know what I mean, that I think we kind of tend to just leave him off list undeservedly. You know what I mean? So, but it'll be a very interesting. So that's my top 5. I think Jay was a little bit worried that it was going to be junk from the start, but I think it's a solid list. I do, both of them.
Yeah, I don't think they were bad. I think overall they were good list. I like to see the AB. The AB really, like, I was a big fan of seeing AB at number 2 because that was something that, looking back, I wish that I was able to put it higher on my list. I only put it in my box, being a little bit safe because I was the first one. But yeah, I like the boldness there. I think the Coriolis and the Handley I'm not the most upset about. I think I'm cool with those being the most to watch. And I do agree with the Eagle pick. I think the Eagle is someone you have to watch in 2023 because that's going to be, he's either going to be turned into the greatest disc golfer of our era or he's going to flop. And the potential he had is going to be seen as disappointing, I think. So those are some things to watch.
I think it's so important. I think it's so important for disc golf that he does return to elite. Like,
I think so too.
If we don't have an elite Eagle, I think it's just bad for disc golf. You know what I mean? Like, I
would agree.
I get really worried about it.
Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of The Spit Out. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to like, follow us on all our different social medias. If there is a different top 5 you want to see us do, we don't have one set for next week, so leave a comment below if there's anything in specific, or we're going to have to come up with another one for you guys. But hopefully you guys liked this episode, and we see you guys in the next one. Peace.